allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We'll now move into our comments from the floor by the public. Do we have anyone signed in, Madam Clerk?
No comments at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. I am hoping for an approval of the agenda unless staff has any changes today. No changes? Okay, looking for a motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. We'll now move into the approval of the minutes from July 22nd. Are there any changes from the board or does someone have a motion?
Madam Chair, I do have a correction to the minutes towards the very end where it was a motion at the end and a second. It stated that I had made the second and I was not in attendance.
Right.
That was the morning my dad passed. So
Good catch.
So I know I see that the minutes, is this new? Are done by a company now that watches the video. We just started that. Okay. Yeah, but so they're watching the video and they obviously heard somebody else's voice, so I was not in attendance.
Right, okay. I'm not even sure who made the motion on that or who seconded that motion.
So if I can, maybe the way to do it would just be direct the clerk, go back to the video.
Okay.
Correct.
And then bring them back to us.
Or you can approve it with that correction.
Okay, all right. Looking for a motion with that correction.
So moved.
Thank you. Looking for a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions on the motion from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. That motion passes. We'll now move into board matters. The RSCVA review and discussion to revise the current board policies. Who's going to lead us through this? Mr. Kennedy?
Sure, so happy to.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Hill. So in your board materials, you have a red line of the board policies. That red line is a comparison of the documents that was presented last time with all the changes that I've made. In making those changes, I just sat down with the video and went through the video, making sure I picked everything up. At Chair Hill's suggestion, I also looked at the Washington County Board of County Commissioner policies and pulled some of those in as well that I thought were applicable for the committee's consideration.
When you say Hill's suggestion, you mean Steve Hill?
No, Chair, yes.
Okay, I didn't know, because I know we were looking at some LVCVA overlay too. Okay.
Yeah, so these are largely based on the LVCVA's current policy, and so we're just kind of revising them to meet our unique needs. But the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners also has a policy document, and I've pulled some of those policies in here as well. So I'll sort of take direction from the board if we want to just kind of do a page turn and go through these. It's probably the easiest way to do it.
Yes, that's right.
So the table of contents, I've not spent a lot of time on. Once we get everything else finalized, I'll go back through and conform the table of contents, make sure that all the page numbers and sections match up. So moving on, board policies, I believe it's on page 5 of the PDF you have, policy 101. 101, 102, 103, have just kind of gone through, made some cleanup changes. I've noted here for the full board's consideration that the requirement that the chair of the board of directors be an elected official is statutory. And so if we want to make any changes to that, that would need to go through the legislative process. Next page, which is policy 103. Last section I've highlighted. We talked about this last time on whether or not to put term limits on the chair or any of the other officers. I've just highlighted that to bring that to the full board for the full discussion and sort of let the board make a determination on that unless the committee wants to make a recommendation.
I have a question on, kind of as we're looking at the officers, which are the 4 positions, the secretary, we talked about this too. is it secretary slash treasurer? But really our secretary has been the board clerk when we look further down at all those responsibilities. And it kind of makes it sound like in here that it's 4 positions that 4 board members have to hold. I'm just, can you clarify on the secretary?
Yeah, I apologize because you raised that on the first draft and you weren't here and I didn't circle back with you. So those 4 positions are statutory. So we have to designate a chair, or sorry, the 3 positions. We have to designate a chair, a secretary, and a treasurer by statute. The secretary and treasurer's duties are administered through staff. But by statute, we have to designate somebody. And typically, they can be separate, but we usually combine secretary and treasurer
Okay.
into one position.
Okay, so it's the chair, the vice chair, then the secretary slash treasurer.
Correct.
Okay, which is what we've done and what, but administered
Well,
with
actually-
staff is all the
Staff,
board clerk does a lot of that secretary
yes,
stuff, but the treasurer, who's Stephen right now, would be that, it's not, we don't have to add a 4th position, is I guess what I'm asking.
correct.
Okay.
And Ben, just for my, if you don't mind, is that okay?
Mhm.
Sure. For my clarification. With the highlight, where are we at on the discussion of it being a 1 or 2 term?
Rotating.
Yeah,
So we discussed it at the last meeting and the consensus there was that should be a full board decision.
Mhm.
and what the wording look like?
It would depend on so if the board wanted to say, we're gonna impose a term limit and we want it to rotate between the 3 jurisdictions, I could come up with that language. I just didn't do it here because we don't know if we're gonna impose a term limit and whether or not we do, if we still wanna sort of mandate that it,
Yeah. I mean, I'm leaning towards the direction as a 1 member, that would be what, I mean, that's what
We
we
recommend,
discussed.
let's recommend it.
I would think that that would be, I'd like to have wording ready, because I think that is what we came out of the last
Mhm.
meeting on.
Mhm.
Because we could do that through, because the board, and I agree, the full board has to decide. But this subcommittee could make the recommendation and really the rotating, that's set like other boards and commissions that Alexis and I both serve on. It's a set rotation. So, you know, I had it as Sparks. Now we have, Reno has it and then Washoe County. And it's a whole, it's not just rotating, but it's predetermined, who has that. I think just, you have other regional planning governing board, I know does that. Do you?
We added it to Tomo, we added it to
Okay.
WRWC.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and it just makes it super easy because then there's no conflict
Yeah.
of who's gonna chair which jurisdiction. It's already set up
Exactly.
in your policy to determine who rotating and which jurisdiction takes each rotation.
Mhm.
and would so the recommendation be that it's a chair is a 1 term, so 2 years?
Mhm.
And then
It
we'll
automatically-
sort
Yeah.
of use the line that we've had, so it went Sparks, Reno, Washoe County.
Mhm.
Okay, I will put that language in.
Thank you.
And to be clear, so the statute requires that the board elect a new chair every 2 years in July of even number of years. I don't know that if a future board did not want to follow this, that this would be binding because the statute.
just your
gives them-
rule.
Right, it's just a sort of a general agreement,
Mhm.
but just want to make clear that if in the future a board decided not to do it, I don't know that these rules would bind it.
Because it's statutorily, it says they have to be elected by the board.
Yep, every
Okay.
July of every even number of
Yeah,
years.
but statute just says they have to be elected, right? But even if it's a predetermined election, if our rules are saying that it is a rotating chairmanship, like, I don't know how we'd have to waive the rules in order, so the board would have to waive the rules. We can do that with anything anyways.
Right, the issue is we just want to make clear that a current board can't bind a future board on
Yeah.
something that they're voting on by
I got it,
statute.
okay.
Our rules at the county say that we can break them,
That you what?
that we can break them. Just in the same way that the youth remember when
Yeah.
you said that, and maybe you were like, I don't like that. I think that you can, even if you don't put it in there, you
Yeah.
can break your own rules, because as long as it's not a statute.
But at least we would have
Yeah, the guy.
the agreement that, hey, this was a policy.
Yes.
We don't take it lightly, just change it, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
And I
so,
think what you're saying, Ben, too, is unless we were to have done it legislatively, which again, I'm not opposing that. But you're pointing out that since it's not legislatively mandated, this is purely just policy.
Correct.
Okay.
but having that policy would be really nice, because in the past, it's been
Right.
an ongoing issue. Way before I was here.
Yeah.
You know, on who the chair was and the battle and the political battles that went on for that. And we don't need that. And I agree with Alexis, and because we have that already set up in other boards and commissions, it's just, it takes that conflict and also makes each jurisdiction understand that they'll have a rotation, so who we have on each commission or board, that person is going to be chair. Because then we get to decide on the local level who we want in those positions, because they will be chair of a board or a commission.
Is there a way to put into that policy something that ensures that as it rotates, that chair is not also the chair of 5 other regional committees? No.
Because they're all individual, they're
Correct.
also separate.
Right, you could have a situation where it's mandated it goes to Reno and the Reno rep is also the chair of every
Everything
committee
else.
is big time commitments. And that may be a situation where that's where we waive the policy, right? If the Reno rep said, it's too much, I don't want to do it. fine,
Yeah.
Then we wouldn't.
Well,
Which
but
we did at RTC when Reno couldn't take it on when Oscar resigned.
I guess what I'm saying is,
Oh, yeah.
couldn't we put into our policy that we're gonna start at a time that these core other regional committees, as they rotate, were staggered? You understand what I'm saying? Is that possible?
Do you have to spell out then the regional committees? I don't know,
It's probably,
Too
is
much?
there, and again, I say this.
I just don't wanna
risking
overwhelm.
going into the weeds of this deal, but is there a way to put that if that person opts not to accept, that they probably move to the end of the line?
Yeah.
You don't just bump to the next session, you go.
Next time, you're.
You forfeit it, you go back.
To the rotation.
Yeah.
Or that person, whoever the elected is, if they wind up having 3 or 4 chairmanships at one time, the city or the county could say, you know, we're gonna put somebody else in on RSCVA, because we know our chair or our person has too many other, and in all fairness to, you know, that's another option too.
The slippery slope on that is you're putting in somebody in chair that has no experience with the organization. And I'm not saying that it's just, you know, the most complex, but it's, in all fairness, I think it does help having a person in that chair spot that's
Out there.
it helps, but
for sure.
person going in cold.
Yeah, that has served on, yeah, that absolutely has been on this board. Can't be a requirement, but it will be preferential, obviously. Not walking in all seven to chair this.
Correct.
Hmm.
Okay, I will propose some language in the next draft that goes to the board.
Thank you.
Policy 1.04, section 1.2, those are just cleanup items. Section 3, delegation of powers and duties. Where we talked about the CEO signature authority, just added language in there acknowledging that there is the air service fund, and the board had previously given the president CEO authority up to 500,000 to authorize use of those funds. Moving on, section 5, committees of the board. So we put language in that each committee will have an approved charter, and I've drafted those charters and attached them as exhibits to get some feedback on those. And then I've also tried to come up with some language that basically says it's the desire and intent of the board that issues appropriate for committee consideration go to committees first to bring a recommendation back to the board. I don't know if anybody has any input on that new language.
I think you did a great job. You did a lot of work on this, Ben, first of all, so thank you for that.
I appreciate that and happy to help. Performance and compensation reviews, just making clear that the CEO employment agreement sets forth their evaluation process and that we're going to adhere to that. Approval of special awards, I took that section out based on the discussion last time. Policy,
Was real quick, since I was not here, is that just something we didn't feel was, that's an internal decision, not a board decision to be made?
correct, it's approved as part of the budget and we're just giving the CEO sort of authority to decide how that gets handled. 1.05, just incorporating the comments, making clear that the travel is not required, but it's encouraged. 1.06 is a cleanup. Actually, 1.06, section 5, where it talks about setting the agenda. This is something we flagged for full board discussion on, you know, who has the ultimate approval authority for what goes on the agenda.
So is that flagged because this also will come to the whole board? Or
Correct.
something that could be a matter of discussion?
Correct. It's one of those issues where the committee's not making a recommendation and we just want to have the discussion at the full board level and let the board decide which way they want to go on that. 1.09, again, just some general cleanup language.
Hey, Ken, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Jump back to 106. What is just from my own understanding, number 7 is have the power to administer oaths or affirmations to witnesses at personnel. Yeah, personnel hearings.
Correct, yeah, we
We should take that out. Yeah,
never have those.
no,
That's an LVCVA.
yeah, that's a good catch. Yeah, very good.
That is a good catch.
Yeah, we haven't had one since I've been here, so but I wasn't sure if that's it.
I just didn't understand it, so I'm glad we took it out. It's a catch.
They have a lot more employees,
Yeah.
like their structure is different. We have one employee, the board, as your region, so.
1.09, clean up, nothing really substantive there. 1.12, again, there's some language on. So the concept of who ultimately approves the agenda comes up in a couple different sections. And so that's more just a note to me to make sure that it's all consistent when we make that decision. And then there's some new language about placing an item on the agenda. And this is largely from Washoe County and how you handle requests for agenda items. So it's basically saying any board member can put an item on the agenda. Doesn't necessarily mean it will be on the next meeting's agenda, given sort of we want to make sure meetings are an appropriate length of time and whether or not it's a sort of mission critical request. And then just generally saying, even though board members have the right to put items on the agenda, you can't have an item on the agenda if it conflicts with the law or the ability of the RSCVA to conduct its business. And again, that's off the county model.
That's one more question.
Yeah,
Jumping
sure,
one
just-
back, looking at the meetings of the board, and I should know this, but what again defines the ability to go to a closed session? It's not just personnel.
So it's very limited. So you can for personnel, but not for the CEO. So typically the board is not dealing with personnel below the CEO level. So we typically do not go to a closed meeting. You can go to a closed meeting to discuss legal matters with counsel for existing or threatened litigation. But other than that, we don't have many instances where we would go into a closed meeting. They're statutorily listed and there's very few of them.
And it's the same thing that every jurisdiction has. Yeah,
Correct.
It's usually legal. Our close meetings are all legal.
Yeah.
I mean, I know yours too, pretty much.
Last month.
Yeah, is there, and I know we're in the, part of this meeting is a legislative affair discussion, but has there ever been a discussion from the public entities to say, and again, I'm not trying to, but it just, in all fairness to the individual, and I mean, forget if it's Mike or anybody, but there's just no privacy to having a discussion, right? And I guess it's just fair game, right? But
There was discussion, I don't know, 2 or 3 legislative sessions ago.
Yes, there was.
About trying to rein some of that in terms of, you know, when you hire a CEO and you have candidates that the board wants to consider, but if you consider them, they become public. And so that has a chilling effect on people willing to apply. And there was some discussion about trying to change that, and the legislature just wouldn't do it. They basically said that's part of being a government entity.
Mhm.
But to that point, just then, if I'm not mistaken, I think any employee can request, I'm remembering when I ran in, one of the agencies, they can request to have their records sealed from public on a matter that has to do with their work performance or what have you, if there's some sort of substantial harm. Like you
So,
know, it's a certain type of employee that's looking at that, but
so there's a statute that talks about that, and it
they have to
exempts,
request for it.
well, it exempts a CEO that reports directly to the board.
Okay.
So other employees in this organization have requests, yes, the CEO cannot. There's a statute on that, it's a case law.
Okay.
I'm just sort of running through here looking for changes. The next one I think is policy 1.18, requested staff. And this is also from the county. Basically says if a board member wants staff to undertake a project that's gonna take more than 2 hours of staff time, that request should go through the board.
You like that, Paul?
We like that one.
Yeah, I bet you would.
Well, why 2 hours?
At the county, I have no idea, because I think the idea is that, you know, if I ask you to respond to an email about a development that you've already worked on, that's gonna take you less than an hour.
Yeah.
So just the run of the mill work, that's fine, but if it's like a
If
project.
it's significant,
Mhm.
okay, thanks.
that seems like a good one.
We can knock it out to
For
Like
sure.
1 hour, but I mean, I just think that's good policy, right? It's great policy for us, okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Next change 2.01. So it was originally drafted, we had the president CEO sort of job description incorporated into the document. And I just pulled that out and made it an exhibit so that it doesn't sort of live in 2 places. So if it changes, we can just swap out the exhibit and not amend these again. 2.02 again is just a recognition that the CEO compensation evaluation is addressed in the employment agreement. Uh, 3.01, section 8 we took out, which places on legal counsel the obligation to receive and address notifications of suspected violations of the conflict of interest policy. And based on the discussion at the last meeting, those just go to the Nevada Commission on Ethics. So it's not putting legal counsel in a position of investigating one of its clients, which would be.
I'm sorry, really quick, back to 2.02. So this committee, we're going to do the compensation instead of the chair and vice chair.
Yes, so
Okay.
typically
And it
it comes,
always has happened that way?
it comes to this committee
Okay.
for recommendation, and
Got
then
it.
the recommendation goes to the board.
Okay.
Section 3.02. Just sort of clarifies my reporting structure, right? So I represent the organization through its board, so the board members are my clients. So I report to the board chair, and then just making clear that in dealing with staff, I am their attorney for dealing in RSCVA business, but for anything personal to the staff, I don't represent them.
Who does staff has? So if our RSCVA at large needs representation. Staff and board and our brand and our organization, that is general counsel.
That's me.
Board members need advice or legal guidance as in our actions on the board, that's general counsel.
Correct.
CEO needs guidance, direction, action, questions that are legal, that's,
Me.
oh, that is you.
If it's the CEO in his capacity as the CEO of the organization. And so to give an example, not the CEO, but prior CEOs, issues come up, and then the CEO can become adverse to the organization. And at that point, we're very careful to say, we don't represent you in your employment issue with the RSCVA. If you want your own attorney, go get them. We represent the organization only in those type of matters. Moving on, 4.04, we just took out the cease and desist letters. That's not really typically an issue for us. That's an RSCVA thing to clarify. The next change I have is in Article 6. That 6.015. So it's sort of throughout this section, I've just tried to make clear that while we addressed it in our board policies, board member ethics are statutorily driven. Your conflict of interest statute or your conflict of interest policy is expressed by the statute. And just reflecting, as each of you have, when you're put on the board, you sign that ethics acknowledgement. Just to make board members aware that that's a statutory issue. And then some language just clarifying that if the statute changes and there's a conflict between these policies and the statute is the one that.
This signature, so I don't remember filling out this form, I'm sure I did. Does it say that, does it ask me like with TRPA, we fill out the same form of like, do we have any potential conflicts, list them?
No, so this form, so you would not have signed it for the RSCVA, so the statute says if you're an elected official, you sign that form
When
as
you're
part of
sworn
the
into
county commissioner.
office.
Yes,
Yeah.
so you don't have to do it for the
Okay,
RSCVA.
okay, got it.
The non-elected members all sign that form every time they're appointed or reappointed.
Ben, didn't we, that's what we thought, and I thought I did get something to sign.
That's different. That's the insurance bond, the bond.
Okay, I knew I had to sign.
Yeah.
something. I thought it was
Yeah.
taken care of, because we have to do that as an elected, so we're already we're under that statutory requirement,
Correct.
okay.
Yes, and in listing conflicts, the statute doesn't require it. So you've got sort of, it says when you have, what constitutes a conflict, but you don't have to give us a list of any possible conflict parties. That's sort of, statute imposes that obligation on the board members.
Okay.
That basically self-police and report those conflicts if one arises.
And we can do that, which we have on meeting by meeting basis. If something comes up and we can have board members before, just like I have on council, that we express possible conflict of interest, and whether it's about conflict, we may have to abstain, or whether we just have to read the statement that you helped draft of what.
their conflict is. So it's
What we just
closed.
stated at that agenda item or that decision.
And the change in section 6 to the second and third paragraph sort of addresses that issue. So there's a statute that says it's the policy of the state that officials elected or appointed to boards are expected to vote on the matters before them. And so this just makes clear that unless your conflict rises to actually require recusal under the statute, you have to vote.
That's what so that's the Board of County Commissioners has that requirement too.
Yes.
So that's good, because it's not always clear to, especially people who are not elected, that they can vote, even if they don't want to. On certain issues.
Section 7, nepotism. So we took that out because that's addressed in other RSCVA HR policies. And we just didn't want any possibility of a conflict there.
So it's not a policy, it's falls under HR policy, not the general board policy.
Correct.
Okay, because that's a question I had. I'm like, wait a minute, and I was looking to see where did it go?
Correct, so we already haven't adopted that.
Okay,
as
it's
a
in
policy.
HR, okay.
The 6.01, section 9. So I added that basically as just a note to board members to be conscious of. So there's case law in Nevada that says, if you're conducting public business, even on a personal device, those emails and texts are subject to public records law. So I want board members to be aware of that. And then also noted that if a board member wants an RSCVA email that they'll use only for RSCVA business, we can accommodate that. We have in the past.
Would that protect the board member if you went for that option to say your private phone and text are not?
So your phone and text would still be fair game, but it would prevent me from saying, Stephen, we got a public records request. You have to go through your Peppermill email
Right.
and find anything that's responsive. You just have all your RSCVA business in one place.
So really on private phones and accounts, this is text and email.
Correct.
Okay, so, I have two phones. I have my own private phone, but I have my city phone. So all business I do for the city, including our CPA, is on that phone. That is what, I don't conduct business on my private phone, but does that apply, or would you guys need both of my phones if there was a records request?
If you said I have a city phone and that's where all my business is, then
Yeah.
that would be it.
Okay,
It's to make the board clear that if they have text on their private phone and we get a records request and they say, well, that's my personal device, that doesn't matter.
because we're not issuing phones like the city issues us,
Yeah.
gives us the option. And we
There
don't have-
I mean, 5 years ago, it was different or something. There was a recent law that ruled
There's a case.
that, yeah, and so it basically said, regardless of what email address you use, regardless of what phone you use, if you have done business on your private phone, that is open for public records requests. And, so I think I don't remember where it was out of, but now everything is fair game. So like, you're right, we should have separate things that we do things as a member of this board under, but that doesn't stop if someone wants to go, no, I wanna, Tina, your emails from your Yahoo account, they can.
Well, and right now, more than ever, we've never had so many public information requests ever. There's a few individuals and groups that are flooding. At least the city, probably county, probably Reno. Here, have we had many public information requests for our CBA? They're out there and they are having the time it costs, because then legal has to redact the time, the employee time spent on that. And we're actually looking legislatively of some changes to that, because it's just, you can't, the cost to do that, employee cost of time. And I don't think, do we get them here? Have we had many?
I was just saying, we get them, but it's slowed way down.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. We do get them occasionally.
Okay, but you guys weren't flooded or inundated too much with them.
Mhm.
And yeah, well, I mean, we're public, it's a public entity, and we know that we can, but unfortunately people are abusing it. And so I think the board understanding that just kind of safeguard the board, to understand, it's down, they're on my phone, well.
You know what,
If people, yeah,
can I actually take it, like, I know you're recommending it, but maybe we could bring it back to the board and just ask that all of us get an RSCVA email moniker that, like, it could even be, I mean, personally, you can have it sent to you in your various ways, but operating out of that, it's just, I think it's a good practice for the board.
Yeah.
And so.
And we,
I think that would be good. That'd be
we
a really
should
good
just
idea.
do it.
yeah, and we had offered business cards to the board, so.
We should just, I mean, when we get through it, let's flag it, and I think it's something that we should just impose, that we force ourselves to do this.
Mhm.
And I know none of us want another email address, like it's exhausting, but it's just smart.
Mhm. Smart.
Smart.
Mhm.
Okay, let's see, the next change, 6.02, that's just again to reflect that ethics complaints go to the Nevada Commission on Ethics, not to the legal counsel. And then Article 7. Policy 7.01, so this was at the request to bring the anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policies into the board policy document. And because those are existing HR policies, the way we've structured it is to make those exhibits. Again, just to make sure that those policies only live in one place, and if we change the HR policy, we just swap out the exhibit with the new policy. But I've included them here, and so if this committee wants to review them and make suggestions for changes to take to the board, we can do that. And then I think at the board level, it would actually be we'd be changing the HR policy, not this policy, changing the HR policy, and then just attaching the new HR policy to this document. Section 801, what should be 802 here? 801 and 802 are what Commissioner Hill was referring to earlier. It comes from the Washoe County Commission policies. It basically says these are board policies that the board has adopted and they're for the board only. So if the board wants to deviate from them, they can. And there's no private right of action or, third parties can't complain that something's invalid because it wasn't done in accordance with these policies. The board's always free to act. And however it sees fit, regardless of what these policies provide. And that takes us through the policy document. We all just pause and any questions, clarifications, additional issues.
You did a good job. Do we require training, harassment training or anything
We do,
for staff, but not for board?
for staff.
So then the next schedule, I've basically just taken a crack at drafting charters for our existing committees. So we have executive and legislative committee, finance and facilities, and special events fund committee. Just based on my history and what I've known the committees to do, I've included that. If available, I've looked back at the board minutes where the committees were created, where the board discussed some of the things that they were putting the committee in place to do. And I've just tried to summarize all that here. So I don't know that we want to read through it, but if anybody has any comments on any of them, or we can read it if you want, sort of your discretion.
I don't sit on finance and facilities or on special events. I look to the people who sit on those to make sure that they're accurate, but I think you did a good job.
Well, and we need this, right, so that we can take official action in our committees, these formal committee. We needed that charter, because when we had that conversation about whether the committees use the recommendation to preserve time at the general meeting, we have an official vote that sends actionable items up to the board for recommendation.
Right.
We can go on consent and move forward.
And so the way I've set it up, basically the CEO, the board chair, or the committee chair can bring something before the committee. For instance, finance. We don't want to bring every expenditure before finance, but when we're talking about the track, which is sort of a major out of the ordinary expense, the board said, let's refer that to the finance committee, make sure we have the funds, and they can bring a recommendation back. So I've tried to sort of draft it to work that way when those types of issues come up. And maybe the way to do this before we bring these to the entire board at the next board meeting, I'll send the charters off to the committees, and invite any committee comment, and if I get them I'll incorporate that before we bring them back to a board.
Look, and sitting on the finance and facilities, it looks good to me, and the question I had, each one, the membership is divided a little differently to where, like when you shift to special events, we actually use outside. Correct, don't we use,
Yeah,
what's the word I'm looking for?
three community members.
Yeah,
We set that up, and then four, all the other subcommittees had four. And then a special events is the only one that has outside advisors from the university, arts community, and from the sports
Sports/general.
sports slash, yeah.
is that, does that read correctly on that, so it's under organ with if I just said it was members consisting of no less than 4 board members, does that mean? To me, it's less than 4, isn't it?
No, we want no less than 4. So we want 4 board members on that special events committee to make sure that the board members always will constitute the majority. So 4 board members and then up to 3 outside individuals. I believe right now, one of the outside seats is vacant. So we would want that to hold up having a meeting of that committee if we needed to. So then you would have your 4 board members and your 2 community members.
So we've had more than 4 board members on that.
On the special events committee, that's what Christina and I were just, no, so.
Just four.
We've always had 4 board members, but we've had 7 people on the committee.
Okay,
But then what you're saying is there
I didn't
have
know
to
we
be
had
at
that.
least 4.
So I was gonna
There
actually
have to be
ask
4
It's been
board
changed.
members, no less than 4. But yeah, we've had 4 on that. The arts and culture is open.
So Ben, just to get clarity under special events, that committee, if I'm reading under the preamble, the language correctly, it's stating that this is the event opportunity fund, right?
Correct.
Under the director of event development. So if we have an opportunity to allocate funding towards an event, the special events committee we would need approval from them, then to the full board in order to allocate funds from that budget line item to that new event.
So that's how it's been handled for event requests. I know
Yeah,
towards the end of the last administration, we talked about, I believe the board passed a policy that allows you to use some of those funds for marketing.
That's within the marketing special event fund, though, to clarify,
2 different funds.
2
So
different
not
funds.
Yeah,
So there's the opportunity fund, which is the new events.
Correct.
And then there's the marketing existing where
Yep.
events apply. Okay.
And the leftover fund from the marketing fund, I think we all agreed that could be then allocated to some marketing initiatives directly connected to events.
yeah, I think that's something that the committee would consider it. We may want to look at the language in that only because, again, it just slows down the process, right? We had an opportunity last week that is time sensitive. Nominal amount. If we wanted to move forward, we would have, under this language, we'd have to go have a meeting, go to the committee and get it in front of the board. Could be a 45-day process, 60 days.
So would a possible fix be, and it's a question for the committee, if you exempted special events opportunity, the opportunity funded events from this process if it's below the CEO's signature?
That's what I was gonna.
Yeah, the 100,000, yeah. I didn't even know that this committee still existed.
We were just talking about, we don't think it
Yeah,
does.
because I thought staff made these recommendations now and they come to the full board because.
We haven't met in a really long time, and it was to set it up initially, and then to look at special events the bigger special events, and that's before
We
Valerie
Mhm,
Yep,
was hired.
correct.
this committee was for the event opportunity fund
For the
specifically,
opportunity.
not the marketing event fund that we've
Yes.
had in place for a number of years. This is the opportunity fund. Now we've hired a position to oversee that. I think this was established prior to having that position.
I think when we hired the director of event development, that was restructured from the standpoint of what kind of events we're going after, once the amount of money's allocated. I think we just, when the board approved the $500,000, we wanted to make sure that money just wasn't allocated. We had some structure in play and that's why the committee was created, but I don't think they've met in over a year at least.
So can we just take it out?
Or
Or
at least, so that would be, that might be a good discussion, because at the time this was all set up with the potential of looking at big events. I don't think the committee, and I certainly didn't know that you were gonna go hire somebody
Right.
that would be doing that. I mean, that wasn't on the table.
Correct.
So, and the intent of it was to bring in the community, to bring in the sports community, the university and the arts, to help us from their expertise as we're looking for, and they were great. We had some great ideas and kind of things they bring to the table. I think that's still valuable, but maybe in a different context of how we do that to help us make decisions, and get their input was super valuable of the types of events they knew they had, that they just brought more to the table. So I don't know.
But really, if I remember right,
Yeah.
the purpose of that group was really to weigh in on the whole establishment of this opportunity
That'd be
fund, right?
pretty fun, yeah.
That, hey, these would, to me, it wasn't so much you go into perpetuity of, but I think now that that position is there, I would assume that that person is getting with not just these few, but really reaching out across the board.
Right, so that's a great point, Stephen. So when we are looking at opportunities, we're obviously meeting with stakeholders. We're looking at time of year, we're looking at attendee demographics like we would on a group piece of business, right? We're qualifying that opportunity in multiple ways before we would fund it.
And so as we see here today, I mean, the committee does exist.
Okay,
So would the recommendation of this committee be to ask the board to consider disbanding that committee?
yeah, have a discussion about it. Maybe we could get an update also about what's happening in that office too. Maybe like a,
Yeah, we were actually gonna look at the October board meeting to have Valerie come and do a presentation on an update of events that we have pursued and sourcing and what's on the books and yes.
So Mike, does she work, I guess the only pause I take as she's looking at things, and she's obviously has a lot of experience, but she's down in Vegas. So really here, is she working closely with, our intent on this was to bring in those local people, local organizations to help us find and bring opportunities for this money. So if she is she doing that with, whether it's the university or sports or arts and culture, whatever it is, in order to help
Yeah, her,
find those, that connection I thought was great. And I don't know if we encourage her connection with maybe these liaisons. We have set up already.
her communication with, people in the community that from university to Midtown, to the ACES, to the Arts District, she knows more people than I do. I'm not, her communication is extensive. I mean,
Okay, so even though she
absolutely.
hasn't ever lived here, she does that outreach as part of the position, and that's just how
100%.
she
Yes.
operates. Okay, that would be, my only pause. It's like, Vegas, you're not here.
Yeah, and she's here at least a week out of the month. But yeah, her email, her phone calls, and she provides me updates and a report. She is in constant communication with people in the community,
Yeah.
whether it's North Lake or Sparks or Reno, or, I mean, it's,
And
No
maybe
concerns.
as we relook at that, maybe just the connection for her with maybe the people we have sitting on that right now. You know, we've got two of them, those three positions are filled. And maybe making sure she's.
I would
connecting
bet,
with
not
them.
knowing besides Eric Edelstein, who's on the committee, I would bet she's probably spoken to all of them. I mean, the opportunity that I mentioned just a few minutes ago is with Eric, so.
Yeah, and we didn't have that art position, when she left. We were kind of we were in a tough spot because of Art Town. Majority of the people working that are in the art space are with Art Town, and we fund Art Town, so we couldn't fill that art position with somebody that was connected with our town because of our funding.
Yeah,
Remember, we were looking at all these, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so, you know, the Cullen, and we couldn't because of the art town funding.
Mhm.
So that's why that one has stayed open.
Mhm.
It's finding someone outside of that space. So, but yeah, that, I think that'd be a valid conversation too. Is there a need for that committee
Yeah,
if we?
maybe it's advisory only.
or discussion of possible. Standard, but
I mean, I think it comes down to, do we have the confidence in Valerie as an employee of her, that she is truly, to your point, Charlene, communicating with these people in the community about opportunities from their respective segments and areas to ensure that we're looking at everything. And as we sit here today, I'm very confident she is. I mean, she is talking to a lot of people in this community.
And it might be other board members that want still the subcommittee to have a bigger say in it, because she's an employee, and maybe that piece of this committee was like this one is actual board members and the outside people too. So I think it would be good to bring it up to see what the feel is from other board members.
absolutely.
If they feel they want to still be part of that
Mhm.
and not just
Sure.
have someone we're paying to do, if they want a bigger voice.
So I think the two alternatives are keep the committee in place, but exempt events that are under the CEO signature authority, or disband the committee,
Mhm.
which would mean events that are under the CEO signature authority might get approved, and if it's above that, then it would come to the full board.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if we're gonna make an investment over 100,000, that should come to the board
Yeah,
anyway.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Okay. Moving on, schedule 3, so it's just the attachment of the CEO job description, and that just comes directly from the exhibit to the CEO's employment contract.
This is the most recent, correct?
Correct.
That was in place for finance.
And then the next schedules are schedule 4, which are the non-discrimination and non-harassment. So these are the existing HR policies that we've just attached here as schedules.
Were there any changes last year? This is what we've always had.
This is what,
This has not been changed in the last year. They are under current review. And I know that there might be some recommended changes to them, just formatting, things like that, but open to any discussion too, if there are any recommended changes in.
So these are the ones that they already changed, because remember, I think they told us like a year and a half ago or so that they had.
These are not those, because those will have to come to, any changes to any policies will come to, need to come to this committee first,
Okay.
and then to board. There is plans to have all our RSCVA policies. They've been in a process of being cleaned up, of being consistent, and changing with the time, and then we'll come to this committee for full review. I do think Eddie's idea of putting the harassment policy in here was really good though, because we didn't just have it. And so now it's in when you get your board packet, or when you start as a new board member, this is important to be. So that's it.
Because otherwise we wouldn't have seen it.
If you didn't adopt it, you know.
Well, if we
you weren't part
were,
of the
unless we
original
asked,
adopters.
okay, HR has it, but the board doesn't see it.
Mhm.
So I absolutely having this here is important for the board to see.
I had a question, I apologize, I had to jump out for a call. Have you guys covered the questions that you put in on the harassment and the anti-discrimination policy on procedures for reporting conduct of, did we go through this yet?
No.
Are we going through this, or did we already?
We can.
Okay, so here's my question. As I read it, I mean, it's the same thing in both positions. And I know we wanted some guidance for how do we collectively deal with CEO. But I also said, as well as board members, right? Because we sort of need to put ourselves as executives into one bucket. And then, but this list of the 7 categories is how I read it, Ben, of how, I mean, one, I just think give me some guidance,
Page 31,
Dr.
sorry. The under procedures for reporting conduct of the president CEO.
48 on my computer.
Yeah.
It's like right here.
Right.
Yeah, see, wait.
So it's the same thing on both. Yeah, so I just, you know, we have employees, we have management, we have human relations director, board of directors, I mean. My hope is that we have CEO and board members collectively. And what happens if there's a complaint from a person with standing within RSCVA about the executives, board and CEO? That makes sense? So when I first made this comment, I think we should all be in the same boat. And then we need a process that guides us onto how someone complains, if there is a justifiable complaint within harassment and anti-discrimination, both justifiable. What's the process when that happens?
And Molly, you can weigh in, but so for staff, those 7 categories sort of lay out all the possible reporting parties. And when those parties are notified, sort of the steps that are taken and how that's handled for staff. These are the existing policies that have been adopted. So we don't have a policy for.
Wait, time out. So you're saying this is an existing policy?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh.
So let me just clarify to make sure I understand kind of the distinction you're making, is that the board of directors, the only employee that reports to the board of directors is the CEO. And so these policies say if there's a complaint about the CEO, here are all the avenues and the ways that those complaints can come in and how they will handle. I agree with you that that probably should also encompass any board member to which there is a complaint. I think that's a really great addition. There's a certain process that you would go through because this board engages in conduct, or they would participate or investigate or make decisions related to the relationship, to the employment relationship with the CEO. Other staff members, they would not, the board would not be involved in any sort of investigation related to any staff member or anything like that. So I think separating those two is actually probably, having distinct areas is probably really smart. And I appreciate that comment. And then as far as what you want that procedure and process to be, now that we understand that that's kind of where you're going, that's, we could definitely, if you need clarity or what you would like to see, we could definitely make that. Because I will tell you also, and this might be a great place for Ben to weigh in, when there is a complaint against a board member, there's also, it's more difficult on how you would handle it. Because for example, if it's an elected official, depending upon what the complaint is, it's really hard. What is the authority to do anything other than go to the ethics commission?
Or the AG.
Or the AG?
Yeah, it's criminal.
Okay. So can we, let me ask this to save time, and I want feedback from my other board members. I feel like 7 categories, and they're not even like real, like legal counsel is listed, but it's not legal counsel making a complaint against the present CEO, right? It's what does legal counsel do? But management, if someone is a management, how do they complain? If someone's the HR director, how do they complain, right? It's just, I don't think we need all these categories. Make sense?
Yes, I understand where you're coming from.
I would love to include CEO and board members as a group, right? We're putting ourselves in there as well. And then, I don't have the magic bullet, but when a person of standing, and I think that's important, right? Like, I think we need to identify a person, like, it can't be someone in the public that complains against Stephen, right? Or because he went to Minden. right? It has to be a real thing, like it has to be someone internally.
I think your point, just looking at it another way, is an anonymous factor, right? But somebody from the outside could complain against me anonymously. But, and how do we vet that? Yeah,
But I think to that point, Tim, that shouldn't be part of our policy. Someone could complain about me, but if someone had a justifiable complaint about me, that should from the outside to the Nevada Commission on Ethics. That's how it happens across, like, there's no
It's
reason.
not on harassment, my friend, that's with you.
No, okay, but let's just, we're being recorded, but if there is a harassment case and someone internally says, hey, member Applister harassed them in some way, we need a process for that internally. But if someone outside said, member Applister harassed them, that's different. That's not me as member Applister acting in my duty as Reno Sparks Convention and Visitor Authority board member interacting, that's a different, because what we're talking about is human relations. We're talking about employees and staff. Those cannot be fair standing.
it's a little bit, now I don't know the legalese, but when you have your steps here of investigation procedures, and I think the first one is to interview the complainant and the alleged harasser, it's almost if they are internal, you continue on. If it is deemed they're not, or they won't identify, could they be directed to the Nevada Ethics
Or the AG's office.
or the AG's office, and it now is no longer an internal?
I think it depends upon who the complaint is about. I think that's where the distinction comes with respect to whether or not it's a board member or an employee, something employed by the RSCVA. Because even if a complaint is anonymous, for example, you do not know whether that could still be coming from an employee. We actually have what we call ethics point. It's an 800 number that people can call and make complaints. And it could be about the CEO, or it could be about any employee. They might have an issue with their manager at the bowling stadium or something like that, and they have the ability to make that complaint. And that is a best practice in human resources, where people are able to make complaints because you want to know if there is conduct that is occurring that should not be occurring and that is a violation of our policy. You want to know that early so that you can stop any conduct and prevent any liability, because that is how you stop claims being made from a legal perspective.
Can someone complain against me, the Commission on Ethics? I feel like most of myself for complaining to the Commission on Ethics, but can someone complain to the Commission on Ethics anonymously?
I am not well versed. I suspect yes.
Yes, in
Okay.
certain circumstances, yes.
So there is a pathway for someone to do that. That's what I'm saying. We have a path for someone to get something out there and a body to oversee it, to investigate, to see if there is cause, investigate, and then whether to take the steps forward or throw it out, right? Like that's what they do. That is their job.
So I think to a certain extent, right? So the Commission on Ethics has their set of statutes, and that is what they are charged with policing and enforcing. An HR complaint, like a harassment or sexual harassment, I don't know that fits within their statutory framework. As an organization, that's a human resources issue. And my guess would be the Commission on Ethics would say, duly noted, organization, you have this human resources complaint, you need to deal with this.
Okay, so they would push back if someone complained against me internally. I mean, this is why, like, I definitely don't, I think we need to create this system internally some complaint, there's a line that they can call
Mhm.
anonymously,
Which we have.
which we have.
Correct. In a form.
And that goes to where?
It goes to human resources. I think it goes to the CEO, not just human resources. And, then human resources is supposed to copy council.
So a complaint against me goes to the Human Resources Copies Council, right?
Right.
Complaint against CEO goes to Human Resources Copies Council.
But it's not always, so you need to, under any sort of best practice, under any sort of policy, is there needs to be multiple avenues of complaint. And that's one of the reasons why this was revised after, other investigations that had occurred, to say, if a complaint comes in from this person, this is what that person is supposed to do. If it comes into a board member, the board member is to notify the chair, you know, where it's supposed to go, but giving multiple avenues for people to be able to complain so that they can go wherever they are comfortable. For example, only saying you can only go to human resources. Well, what if the human resources officer is the person who's harassing me? I can't make my complaint to them. I need to have another avenue. That's why there were the multiple places. And that happened at the city, which is why the city created a hotline too, because people didn't feel comfortable complaining to the HR and also the city manager.
So, but your example, Eddie, is if it was any one of the board members, how would it go to HR? Because we're not employed by, but we serve in our capacity.
Yeah.
Is it because we're serving in the capacity of the RSCVA that HR would handle
Well, and that
any
actually,
harassment?
going full circle back to when you said we should have a board policy, which I believe should be different. Board/CEO should be different than general staff.
Yeah.
General staff, it would be handled internally by HR because HR works in conjunction with the CEO and any other executive management that might be issued there and deals with those staff issues. When it becomes a board, your HR department, who reports to the CEO, who reports to the board, cannot be in charge of investigating or handling anything with respect to the board that oversees them. That's why we often, in any of those cases, that's why it goes to the chair or the vice chair, depending upon who's involved, and legal.
So,
Legal.
but
Are you looking for a policy? I guess I'm trying to
yeah,
figure out what, are you looking, everything in here has to do with the CEO. So complaints and steps for a CEO complaint. Are you looking for, if it's a board complaint, if it's executive team, that's not spelled out? Because all of these are president CEO,
yeah, so.
not anybody else.
So I think, first of all, Molly, in terms of how someone can issue a complaint, I don't think listing different people that they can go to issue a complaint is the appropriate way. I don't support this, right? But if we have a phone number, if we have a form, a website, a Nevada Commission on Ethics that gets circled back, an email address, that's fine. So however the complaints get issued, I'm comfortable with. To Councilman Bivey's point, if I do think we all need to be in one bucket, and I think I know I keep pointing over there, but the HR needs to be in a separate bucket. Like, if you feel like you have a complaint against the HR person, where does that go to?
That's why you have multiple avenues of able to complain.
I know, but those are two different classes. So take the staff, complaints against staff out. Everyone else, you just have CEO and board members in one bucket, you have HR in a different bucket. And then you have your general policies for how things get reported, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The way that those complaints come in, they all go to HR, legal counsel, to chair, review. I do think we need a policy on adjudicating that complaint. How does that complaint get initially reviewed to be determined whether or not there's substance or intangible, like, we need an adjudication process that goes before we go to the next process, which is a closed door board meeting with all of us that's legally, right? That's the next step beyond that.
So, and that is where the policy provides that when a complaint comes in, it goes to the chair, and the chair makes decisions and is empowered under the policy to make certain decisions related to that. at that point in time, because otherwise, if you're going to make decisions against your one employee, who you have to do that in a public meeting. And so vet that complaint in a public meeting to say whether or not you would investigate or move forward. Yeah, the chair, that's where the chair has discretion. And so you can disagree with the chair.
But couldn't you, before it gets to the chair, couldn't you have an adjudication process that we create a policy, something like a complaint gets issued and filed, if there is a named complainant, right, there's an interview, a conversation to see if there is substance, and then, like, that's the adjudication, then it is sent to the chair for that next step. If there is no named complainant, we'll review it, but if we can't substantiate it, we can't send it to the chair because we've adjudicated it to show that there's no substance.
Who's adjudicating it? And so the problem is that if it's about the CEO, then you have a public meeting issue where if you're making any decisions related to something like that, with the CEO, it is affecting their employment and you're required under statute to do that in an open meeting.
But if the complaint goes to HR, mysterious HR over here in the corner, and legal counsel, right? Why can't you three or whomever two be the adjudicators if we set a policy that says upon review and upon initial interview with a named complainant, if there is reasonable, give me a standard, right? Reasonable suspicion to send it off to the chair, then we will do so. If it cannot meet a certain standard in that adjudication process, it won't be sent to the chair and it will be dismissed because we can't substantiate it.
Because that's the result after an investigation occurs is whether or not you substantiate it or not substantiate it.
Wrong word is substantiation. We can't determine whether or not this is an AI generated complaint or a human complaint.
Well, okay, let's just be real. When Molly called the chair and I, because I'm also the chair of this committee, to talk about the complaint that I think is the elephant in the room that you're talking about, there was discretion and discussion on whether it was legitimate or not. We determined it named people. It wasn't, sorry if this is uncomfortable, like, anyway, we're having a conversation, but it was a discuss, and then there was a determination, do we do an investigation with the acting CEO in the office or not? And then there's pros and cons that, and that was the discretion of the chair, and honestly, it's risky to decide not to investigate for this organization. It's a problem and could get this organization in some serious trouble if we didn't. You know what I'm saying? I know you disagree with it. It sucks. The whole thing sucked. But yeah, we have an incredibly vetted CEO because of it, I will say.
But I feel like it put you guys in a bad spot. Like,
I know,
looking back, I think it puts you in a bad spot.
That's
And that's what I'm trying to, like, why can't we create a policy that allows for a pre-review that doesn't engage you before you need to? That's my question, Molly. Like, there's got to be a policy that allows for a pre-adjudication review just to make sure. I mean, what if I made a motion to say, you need to ensure that this is not a Prince of Nigeria or AI substantial, you know what I
You'll
mean?
never know that until you investigate it, which I think it's cart and horse problems here, because unless you investigate it, you will not be able to find out whether or not it's the Prince of Nigeria or somebody else. And
You
so,
will know if the person names himself in the complaint. If the person puts their name down and it complains and has a justifiable harassment or discrimination complaint, then you do know, right? What we're talking about is anonymous complaints.
yeah, but you can't not have those because that's where other organizations have gone.
But that's what I'm saying, there is opportunities for an anonymous person to go through a process, right? And then we give them the opportunity for anonymous. I guess my question, Chair, is why can't we draft a like pre-adjudication, allowing a allowing our HR and our legal to say, this is, we're trying to extort us for their $5 million Bitcoin, right? Like, why can't we create? So let me flip it. What if we got a complaint that unless you give us $5 million of Bitcoin, I'm going to expose member Avalister's secret, gaming thing that's taking money away from the RSCVA, right? And blah, blah, blah. And Peppermill's going under because Avalister's taking all this money away. Give me 5 million Bitcoin, and it's anonymous. What's to say that that's not as legitimate?
Because that's not a harassment or discrimination claim, I'm gonna say that that would be, if you're taking money away, that is squarely within the Ethics Commission. And the difference is when it's harassment and discrimination, the best practices, best legal practices are to, if you know or should have known that there was an issue and anonymous complaints puts you on that standard of known or should have known, then you are obligated and you are under duty to investigate those as an employer.
I get just to jump in, and again, I'm following you. I think there's gotta be examples too, where we have had anonymous complaints to literally fizzle because there is no detail, right? I mean, I know this situation brought, from a public or from a private sector, if we had a complaint, we'll go after the government about my behavior, let's say, it would get investigated. And then there would be variables there that if it's just, one complaint with no backup detail, it probably dies.
Exactly. And that happens as a result
But
of
as
the
a company,
investigation.
they would open up an investigation. I think what's so unfortunate, and it kind of ties back to my question of what allows you to go to closed personnel,
Yeah, you can't.
it's not right.
No,
It's
no.
not fair because it really, I don't know. There's a flaw in this machine. I mean, I'm following Eddie in the sense of, is there one more preliminary step where it's almost like a vetting group assembled of beyond, is it legal to chair and two at-large member? I don't know. But if there's a certain level of detail given, I think you have to go down that rabbit hole, unfortunately, to cover the organization, right?
Right, correct.
Because at the end of the day, I can't tell you how many we have, I'm sure you have, decisions you're making to protect your organization against litigation. And if you're not following, the law on, especially harassment, discrimination, and whether I can say something happened or didn't happen, we're obligated to do the steps that we have. And we do have the option for someone, an employee or someone outside, there's a hotline, they can start there. I mean, it can start there for a complaint, even anonymously. So the process is kind of there already, but we really, our hands are tied over, and rightfully so, because at the end of the day, if we didn't follow that, then we just open ourselves wide open and just start writing checks. Legally, the exposure to the organization, we've got to protect, which is why these two people, amazing people, are here doing that to protect us against litigation, against, and the reputation of this organization. And sometimes it does suck. It's like, and the HR route, I mean, I know personally from City Sparks, that we have had issues and people would not go to HR. So we couldn't even act on them because we didn't have documentation that went to HR or even came to us documented for us to use as evidence for an investigation because people would not come forward. So that's kind of the other end of it that puts you in a bind when people aren't willing.
Yeah, and we did not, let's flip it again, if we did not do what we did, and I'm not saying we're perfect, no one's perfect around here, but that would have gone directly to the media to say, why didn't the RSCVA investigate a complaint that, do you know what I'm saying? And that would not have been good for us as an organization.
Yes, but that would
Yeah.
require a person identifying themselves to go to the media, or if we have to write a check, who do we can't write a check to anonymous, right? Like, they would have to identify themselves at some point.
They wouldn't have to identify themselves until after they make their claim and they have a claim, and so. The problem is what we do at the first instance is how we protect the organization. Even somebody who complains anonymously, and there's cases, current cases right now, somebody who complained anonymously and then suffers an adverse action in their employment, later sues and says, oh, you were aware of these problems because of all of these anonymous complaints, and you did nothing about them, and that just increases the overall exposure for the agency.
So then let me pause and just say, okay. Why not then, let's create a policy that says the RSCVA will not suffer, frivolous complaints. And should your anonymous complaint be found invalid and with malicious intent, the RSCVA will use its resources to claim damages against a person for using our time, our energy, our resources, our taxpayer resources.
Because, you would probably have a court find that to be retaliatory and squashing actual legitimate complaints that are not.
Retaliatory against someone who's being like,
I know,
I-
but you have
I
no
understand
idea.
your
I'm-
frustration.
no.
Welcome to
I think
government,
we
we waste
can.
time a lot.
But I think we can. I think we can say something like that. I don't care if the court says no. I think a statement like that should scare off a person who's trying to be intentionally hurtful. This happens in all the different governments.
It's 100%, and it's,
So why can't we?
but we don't go after people for frivolous things. We just move on with our day, and know that the taxpayer is gonna take a little bit of, to take that, time, and that's just the way that things work, sadly. Being able to prove something as malicious or frivolous and the very low standard for what a quote unquote good faith complaint would be from a court standpoint, even, I look at it or equate it to, I won, I showed that it was frivolous, I should at least get my attorney's fees at the end of a harassment or discrimination complaint, and courts will not award attorney's fees to employers as a general rule. They readily award them to plaintiffs making the claims, but even when you show they're frivolous because of the way the statutes are drafted.
And I can understand your frustration and sort of wanting an adjudication of the claim. The way the policies are now, if there's a complaint, the chair decides whether or not the CEO gets put on leave after discussing with the chair of the executive committee. And then an investigation is commenced. So if you wanted to put, sort of a level of adjudication in there, I think then you're saying somebody has to decide whether or not to move forward with an investigation. Can give a yes or no. The lawyers can't decide that question. We can advise whoever is deciding on sort of the pros and cons, but ultimately that the board needs to empower somebody to decide, or the board needs to do it themselves. So you could empower the chair to vet a complaint and decide whether or not to go forward with an investigation. But now you're putting that all on the chair. And if they say no, and there's merit to it, then that's an issue for the chair. Or you could say the entire board will decide whether or not to pursue an investigation, but then you're coming back to the open meeting issue in that the board is going to have to discuss that in an open meeting, and those claims are going to get out and the media will run with them before we even know if there's an ounce of merit to them. And so that's why it's a delicate trying to figure out the best way to sort of respect the privacy and the rights of the accused individual with making sure we do the right thing. And so as a result, the policy that was put together a couple CEOs ago was if a complaint comes through, somebody's empowered to decide if they remain on the job, and then an investigation is commenced. And so if we want to change that, we can, but there's there's cons to the person that you're sort of making the adjudicator of how to proceed versus just saying, if we get a complaint, we're going to investigate it.
Would it change at all by taking it to the full board and the fact that this has implications of financial, judicial, I'm not using the right terms, right? Could it then or allow itself to go into a closed session discussion?
So your ability to go to a closed session is by statute and it's very specific listed things. That's not an exception. And I think that's a discussion about how the system doesn't really work. And that it would be nice to fix that, but no, we don't have, with the way the statute's written, we just don't have the ability to do that.
And you can't take action, correct me if I'm wrong, but you
Correct.
can't take action in a closed meeting. So even if you went in a closed meeting to have the discussion, you have to come out and say, on this complaint, we are deciding to do X. And it, so it just then goes to a public meeting at that point anyway. So the first thing you'll get is a records request for the complaint itself.
But we can do legal, we do all the time, where our legal meeting, which is closed, council, mayor, and legal, on an issue that's on our agenda or coming forward. You're right, we don't say how we're gonna vote, say the meeting is the next hour. We don't say how we're gonna vote, but we listen to legal, and then we ask all the questions we have to help us make the best decision. So that there's a lot more conversation. A lot of times we go right to the dais, the item comes up, and we simply take a vote. A lot of times we don't even make a comment. So you're in a public meeting, but you're not airing all your dirty laundry per se, because you've already gotten specifically, information you need from legal in a closed meeting that's protected. And then in the open meeting, you can open full discussion, but generally we don't,
Correct. That's usually like you're approving a settlement, right? So there's an agenda item.
It's litigation mostly.
Right. And it's in those closed meetings with council can only be for litigation, threatened litigation.
Okay.
And so the day a
Yeah.
report comes in, we don't have that. We don't meet that standard. And so we've got to just.
Because there's no because it's not litigation is one of the few. Okay, maybe because we have so much.
Right.
Well, in all my wisdom, I have another board at 1 o'clock. So I am going to have to leave for the rest of this discussion. Who would be willing to continue as chair?
We're gonna do legislative
You have
update.
to leave.
And I know you have to leave as well.
Oh, about
Can
20
I
minutes.
ask, I know that we try
I've
to
got
get the
20.
legislative, I can jump on my call, I can jump on the phone.
I
and
could
attend
too.
virtually. Do we have that up and running?
For the legislature.
I've
For the
got 20
legislative?
minutes, legislative justice
But I could be on
here.
the call. I can't be here physically, I could be on the road person. I will stop my thing, I would just ask, can you prepare a seeking damages policy? In case the full board wishes to pursue to put a seeking damages policy into our policy?
I will not vote for that, but I hear what you're saying.
I just want me.
It could be a discussion for the full board. I mean, I think, other than that, like, this looks really good, this document.
Yeah.
It's much
Thank you,
better.
Ben, for everything you
Yeah.
did.
Thank you,
Really
Ben.
The changes at the end.
This is- Yeah, really
I
wrong.
still, those like consolidating it and, yeah, okay.
So I think where we're at with the policy is there's a few things we've talked about today. I'll make those changes and it's ready to go to the next available board meeting.
Wonderful. Yes, that was great. And then, for the legislative update, will you have a quorum if Eddie and I leave, which is 2 members? No.
Well, no, what if I'm attending virtually?
Is there a way, I don't know,
If they call in on Zoom.
is there a call-in that we could do for Zoom?
Yes, we can send out the link. We have Zoom up right now.
Okay, great. If you could email that, then sure, we'll get on there.
So maybe we will recess until
Yes.
you call back
So
in and then
That sounds great.
somebody that's here wants to
Yeah,
take over chair.
I'm good for about,
Can you take over chair since you're in person? Do you mind?
Yep. I'm good for about 25 minutes. I don't have so much to see.
It's
How much
gonna
do
be
you
like,
have?
I only got like 50 or 60 slides to go through. So it's not-
Really fast.
It's just gonna really hammer.
And humor.
So we'll go to recess and we'll reconvene once.
Yeah, I'll look
we're-
for the link.
once they're
Thank
online.
you. Sorry about that.
Okay, so Jesse's ready to roll?
Yeah, it's my very.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we could do more than an hour. even without a gavel.
Ben can.
Want to see them on the main screen here?
Sure, yeah.
Eddie and Alexis, can you hear us?
This is Eddie, I can hear you.
Yes, I can.
Okay, you're recording?
Yep, okay. Did the line pause recording and?
Yep.
We're good, Mike?
No way.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and reconvene, the meeting of the Executive Legislative Subcommittee of the RSCVA. We're on item E2, discussion of upcoming legislative session and legislative priorities. We have Jesse Bottoms here, who is our legislative expert and lobbyist for us. I'm gonna let him give us an update of the upcoming session. Mr. Bottoms.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Getting to talk about the legislative session, the process, where we're at in the whole timeline. Let me just start. I guess I always kind of like to start with the basics, the numbers. We are just 132 days away from the legislative session, which starts on February 3rd. And will run for the 120 days till June, the following June 3rd. We sit right now, is the last time I looked during your previous discussion, 532 bill draft requests so far in the system. I will say that LCB has done a much better job of now, we're more front loading a lot of BDRs now, which is nice. So 532 of roughly what we'll get to about 1,500 BDRs total, just so everybody sort of kind of level set. Every BDR is somebody's idea to do a thing. It's very sort of amorphous. It can say a bill to deal with healthcare, a bill to deal with economic development. Not much there yet. But all BDR, so all bills must be BDRs. Not all BDRs become bills. So we'll get about 1,500 BDRs at the end, roughly. And just again, just from my experience, my God, this will be going into my 10th legislative session. We usually get about 1,000 bills total that are drafted up into the system, roughly. And of those, you probably pass about, I don't know, 750 in a given session, sometimes less, sometimes more. They can be more productive, less productive. It all depends on the tenor, which is set by the election, which we're about to have here in November. Really, at the end of the day, the only real question for this legislative session, the 2025 session, is by what margin the Democrats will control both houses. Control of either house is not at stake. There's just no pathway for Republicans who are in the current minority to make up the ground. There's just not enough playing field. So you're looking at, and really with redistricting in 2021, we're down to a handful of seats. Out of the 63 legislative seats, we're down to about, I'd say there's a half dozen that are meaningfully within what you call a toss-up, legitimately available to be contested by either party. A Senate seat and an assembly seat up here in the north, and then like I said, about 5, 6 down in southern Nevada that are within that majority. And I tend to think, if you guys ask me, the Senate is going to be a super majority to the Democrats. And I think it's going to be a close call in the assembly as to what that margin is, but it'll be within 1 or 2 seats. It's a super majority for Democratic control. Fortunately, yeah, we've watched a number of the bills for you, and largely because obviously, as your previous discussion indicated, you are a public body. We go through a lot of governance issues. There's a whole host of governance issues like public records requests, like open meeting law compliance. Sometimes you'll get into the Budget Act a little bit, not a ton. And then there's always the specific county and fair recreation board issues that pop up in NRS 244A. Over the course of years, you guys have been in a few, but largely these tend to deal with the LVCVA. And just as an example, last session, wrote it down here, we had AB 129 in the 2023 legislative session. That would have proposed to grow the LVCVA by one board member and add a seat for essentially the Latin Chamber of Commerce in Southern Nevada for them to appoint a seat. Most recently for you guys, we've, for the 2021 session, we had a little bit more specific activity related to tax, transient lodging tax for vacation rentals in around the lake. And then we also had an interesting issue the LVCVA was dealing with regard to one of their conventions. There was a number of sales on the floor, and whether or not those sales in the aggregate needed to pay commerce tax. So essentially did the LVCVA need to become a tax conduit for the commerce tax because of revenue derived from conventioners on the floor. That ultimately was worked out. It didn't become an issue that the exemption, there's an exemption there for conventions. So with that, again, I'm happy to answer any questions. That is where we kind of sit at the moment. I wish I could tell you the tenor of the upcoming session. They're always a little different. We won't have the money we had last session, which is going to change the tenor dramatically. Happy to answer your question.
So Jesse, I have a quick question. Of the 532 BDRs, obviously you're tracking, and those are just a BDR, they are not actually a bill, but that's what you're tracking. Was there anything you're seeing that is related to us or you have on your radar for us?
You know, again, there's a number of those public records, open meeting law bills. I haven't seen much specific yet, but again, there's another 1,000 to come roughly. So there's always something that we're going to keep an eye on. Just part of the problem with BDRs is they're just so amorphous. You just don't know what they're most, again, I would say of the BDR so far, by and large, if you ask me to guess, just based on trends, this is going to be a healthcare legislative session. By and large, they're running almost 2-to-1 at healthcare BDR. So that is a clear focus of folks' mindset. But right now, I haven't seen anything specific to the RSCVA, but I will keep you posted. And I will start, we're going to start to send a report to all of our clients, including the RSCVA, that will have those broken out and say, hey, these are the ones we're tracking for you. Yeah, but it's with the admonition that it's.
Stephen?
Yeah, I think, again, I know Commissioner Hilly, she's mobile, but I think the topic of incline, whether it's surcharge, room tax, I know we've gone back and forth between the TARP funding. I know they have needs. I just want to make sure it's well and on our radar, as is any, there's the broader issues, like you said, healthcare and things that could impact the organization. But I think the real purpose of even this committee is, we're a tax collecting agency. They're large dollars, and as things start getting targeted, we just want to make sure that we're all awake, including from other jurisdictions. But I just want to make sure, I know that there's been a pretty, I feel, candid discussion of, I'm going back now a couple sessions when we imposed the surcharge, actually originally started downtown, then the outlying properties did, Incline withheld theirs, and everybody agreed. And I think there's some appetite of them pulling the trigger on that, and just I'm assuming you're somewhat aware of that.
Yeah, no, I've been watching the TRPA discussions, following along with, essentially to see where that discussion is going to just go with any various revenue sources to the lake. But I also sort of have to couch all of this in. I think because of we're going to have we're going to go back to normal, if you will, with regard to our state budget. So I think all pots of money are going to be looked at. in order to make, various folks, want to provide different services. So I don't see that we're gonna do anything, with new revenue. So obviously, existing pots of revenue are very much on our radar. And yeah, I've been watching the TRPA conversation with regard to, transit up there. And obviously, we'll continue to monitor that as it develops.
Okay, Alexis, I see Alexis and Eddie, you both have your hands up. Let me go to Commissioner Hill first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just give some background on, where we are at. Well, at least the TRPA Legislative Subcommittee, also for Marlette Lake, they recommended a $4.25 surcharge for Incline Village and Crystal Bay only properties. But also they want to require it around the lake unless you get an exemption if you're already doing it. And so that's going to be a really interesting piece that will be running this session. And it would only be used for public transit at the lake. So that's what has happened recently. And then that was a recommended bill, and we'll see where it goes from there. Am I correct, Jesse?
Yeah, that sounds exactly like what I heard when I watched the Legislative Committee on Oversight of TRPA and Marlette Lake. So it's
That's it.
under Chair Skip Daly. So that's, that essentially room tax surcharge for optical lake. That's where it sits.
Okay. Eddie?
Thanks. So, just that RSCVA requesting a BDR this session to clean up some of our own governing statute. And, I know that the conversations that we've had are around organizational aspects. So for example, one, that the chair may be any member of the board. And the second idea that was floated is that new members voted on by the appointing authority, that all members get to vote on who may join the board. Is this, it was my understanding that maybe we can have this conversation and your team can prepare some ideas that can be brought forth to the board on whether or not we want to pursue a BDR at this time, dealing with administrative changes of the RSCVA.
Yeah, Mr. Adams, I think that, again, I work for you. If the board says, or, if you would like us to prepare, for working to secure a BDR, working to secure a legislative bill and move forward with that kind of advocacy, say the word and we go, right? It's sort of simple. I work for you and you tell me the policy you wish to enact at the legislative session, and we'll go work to make that happen. Yes, I don't want to overcomplicate it.
So Jesse, to follow up on that, does the RSCVA have a BDR
No.
like the cities do?
Unfortunately, the RSCVA is not one of the enumerated entities or, that gets a BDR. That said, that would sort of be almost most people. So it's not unheard of to go get a BDR from, say, and in this case, obviously our best course of action would be to look at both of the Senate and the Assembly Government Affairs committees, the chairs of both of those bill committees, and then look at their membership for BDRs, because our issues would flow through the Government Affairs Committee.
So we would have to find
we have to find a sponsor.
legislator to sponsor.
Correct.
We don't have one on our own, so we would need a sponsor if we wanted to pursue a bill like Mr. Avisar is talking about on changing either of those things. Mr. Kennedy, do you want to weigh in at all on, is this something that maybe not today with this subcommittee, or would it come from this subcommittee to the board, or is it it's kind of a bigger issue that might be one of those we take to the whole board, like a few things in our policy changes that we're doing? rotating of the chair, we're taking to the full board. Would this be appropriate to take this conversation on those two items to the full board to then determine if we're going to ask Mr. Wadums to pursue possible BDR?
Sure, so it's really to the committee's discretion, right? So, we can only make recommendations to the board, so the question is, does the committee want to vote to recommend these policies to the board, or do we just want to take these policies to the full board and open the discussion there? I think that's the decision for the committee today. And I don't know if Mr. Avlisser has a preference one way or the other.
Yeah. Eddie, do you have a preference?
I mean, obviously, I think the full board needs to make a decision. I'm interested in my fellow board members on your thoughts on those two ideas. I know we've talked about them over the past couple of months, and I'm comfortable with the motion forwarding it to the full board for discussion and possible action on whether or not we pursue BDR that encompasses one, both, or none of those ideas, or anything else that we might want to add.
Okay, Mr. Escalga?
So just so I'm clear, we're talking about two different, I mean, we've got the policy changes that we've made separate. This, in regards to the upcoming legislative session, I'm not so sure, I'm not so comfortable supporting, we just haven't really vetted it out. Now we're half mobile, half here. I'd rather just put it to the whole group. I do think there's repercussions on a couple of the things that we're bringing up for the legislative session, that whether we're in alignment with the LDC, that is going to be one of the initial questions, right? Is how does this fall in line with other CBDs? And so,
Yeah, and I think, and I would agree on, I think, not just because we're half remote and half here, I think, and I know Mr. Kennedy in the past, when he and I have had the conversation, because board members have brought it to us, like informally, not in a board meeting, on, I think Mr. Kennedy providing the historical perspective on why the legislature, when they set it up, what the intent was, why an elected was in that chair position, kind of some historical background for the whole board to get is more than we have today that would help people decide if that's what we wanted to pursue. And then with Las Vegas Commission of Visitors Authority, they have 9 elected members. So I think 9 of their members are elected. Yeah, and they've got, so there's hardly anybody who's not elected on their board. So they're kind of in a different place than we are. But I think that I would agree to bring it to this, the chair only being elected or not, and then members all getting to vote on whether new members come in, which is something I support. But both of those things coming to the full board. Alexis, do you have any feelings?
I'm fine if I think maybe we don't agendize it as like those specific issues to discuss for, the legislative session, but that we could propose something for the legislative session. I would say I'm with Stephen in that we're a little late to the game if we're going to do this. Finding someone to carry this for us is going to be tough. I could be wrong. Maybe Jesse disagrees, but I've been working on like legislative stuff at the county we've been working on our stuff for a long time. So this is just feels a little late, but maybe it's not. I don't know.
Okay, and I'm looking at our agenda for the board meeting. Obviously, the board meeting on Thursday, we're not on the agenda for this subcommittee's decision today on policy or on legislative. So it would not be this coming board meeting, correct? Okay. Any other input? I'm hearing so far not an appetite for us as a subcommittee today. I don't know if we're going to have another subcommittee meeting or not. Is that up to the chair?
Correct.
If you felt you needed one, Alexis, or if we simply look at the following board member, but you're right, time-wise too, when we're looking at October.
Well, as with all
We're
things,
still within time deadlines, but
it always depends, right? I guess I would say it depends. Obviously, the things Commissioner Hill is working on, those are weighty issues with tax consequences, and those are big decisions that have probably a regional impact. I mean, talking about board governance of the RSCVA, I'm not trying to downplay that, but as a BDR, you're not talking about massive preparation time. Again, I'm not trying to say that, I say the word, I go do the job.
I think it's as far as words of future meetings, though, it's as much defensive in the sense of knowing what's being out there. I think this group would want to get, not even so much saying we're putting forward a possible BDR. I'm talking about just purely knowing the landscape of what discussions are being had at the LVCVA that could pull us into the soup on a discussion item. So,
For legislative.
yes.
The legislative updates. Yeah, because because the fact that we're not on Thursday's agenda, so we'd be looking at October, even if we did, the subcommittee met again, wanted to come up with a whole, yes, go with the BDR. Nothing would happen until the board meeting in October, correct?
Correct. And Jesse, I mean, do you feel like if they gave you direction at the October meeting to move ahead with this, that would be sufficient time? Or would you rather see something sooner?
Obviously, I'd rather see something sooner than later. It's always better to be, the best day to do the thing was yesterday, and the next best it's today, right? So, the sooner the better, obviously. October is pushing very late. But again, I will also say, just so you have the full picture, first of all, there's an entire group of legislators that haven't submitted a single BDR yet because they haven't been elected. So, there are folks out there. Now, again, freshman legislators, you're not gonna get the whole level of gravitas, if you will. But again,
That's true.
I'm not trying to say sooner is better, but always depends on the issue.
Okay, where do we want to go here? So we need to wrap it up before I have.
Can I ask,
Yes.
Ben, are we able to have a conversation this Thursday on any of the agenda items about this with the board without action? Just so we get a temperature where the board's at?
No, we're not agendized for any legislative committee business. And the reason we did it with the policies is we just didn't think it was enough time for the board who's going to be reviewing those for the first time to be able to review them and be ready to talk about them. And we don't have any legislative items on this coming up agenda.
And a conversation in member comment is not, is that an appropriate place?
It's inappropriate. We can't substantively discuss and deliberate on things that are not on the agenda.
I guess I'm not asking to deliberate. Could we just have a conversation though?
I would say no. If we're going to talk legislative issues, we should have a legislative agenda item. We can always have a special board meeting if we need to accelerate the timeline. But I would say at this Thursday's meeting, there's no room to discuss legislative policy.
Thank you.
Other than teeing up the topic, right? Like a board member's new business could say, hey, for next meeting, we would like to have everyone's thoughts about how we want to proceed. Is there anything that we want to proceed as a group on or?
Correct. We can tee it up, but we just can't have a group discussion on it.
Okay, Alexis, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh, I just feel like I should point out that when we choose to open a chapter like that, you're opening a chapter. And I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm saying attention is drawn to the RSCVA, and we just were told there's not any revenues like we had the last 2 years because the COVID money has run out. And so we could get some attention drawn to us and not like what other changes that they make in the chapter. So that's my only annoying word of caution.
Okay, good thought.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like any action today for action by this subcommittee further possibilities brought to the whole board. Jesse, we will keep you apprised. What we're gonna do. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna have to go and close that. Go to item F, comments from committee members or CEO or president. No, hearing none. Moving on to G, comments from the floor by the public.
No public comment at this time.
We have no public. So, closing that, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks for jumping in, Shirley.
Huh?
Thanks for driving.